Welcome back to the Malaysia Money Matters show. It's January 17th, 2025. And we're going to be diving deep into all the financial news that could impact your wallet today. We've got a whole stack of articles here covering everything from potential banking shakeups to IPO buzz and even some international intrigue.
It is a real mix today. And some of these stories, I think, could have ripple effect throughout the Malaysian economy.
All right, well, let's jump right in. Let's start with the Malaysian company news. First up, we've got a potential banking behemoth in the making here. Alliance Bank might be getting a new owner, and it's a big one. Singapore's DBS Group Holdings.
So what's happening is that Alliance Bank's largest shareholder, vertical theme, they're considering selling their 29% stake. Now, DBS is already in the Malaysian market, but this move could give them significant controlling interest, potentially up to 49%.
Wow. So what does this mean for the average person banking in Malaysia? Could we see changes in interest rates or the types of services offered?
It's definitely possible. DBS has a reputation for being quite aggressive in their expansion strategies. They're not just looking to maintain the status quo. They want to shake things up. And it's interesting to note that DBS's outgoing CEO specifically mentioned Malaysia as a key target for their growth plans.
So they've got their sights set on Malaysia.
Now let's move on to Incomnilix, the integrated chemical group. They're reporting a bit of a profit dip this quarter, down 31%.
Yeah, not the news investors want to hear. They're blaming rising shipping costs and those pesky currency fluctuations that we've been seeing. But they're also predicting a turnaround later this year, fueled by strong demand in their agricultural chemical division.
So a bit of a roller coaster ride for Incomnilix, but maybe with an upward trend in the future.
That's what they're hoping for. And they've also hinted at some possible mergers and acquisitions in the works, which always adds a bit of mystery and excitement to the mix. Mergers and acquisitions always spice things up a little bit. Speaking of exciting engineering, let's talk about CBH Engineering. They just had their IPO on the ACE market, and it was a phenomenal debut.
Yeah, share price jumped almost 20% on the first day of trading. And get this, the public offering was oversubscribed by a whopping 34 times. Investors were clearly clamoring to get a piece of the action.
That's a clear sign of confidence in the company. And it also speaks to Malaysia's rising prominence as a tech hub. CBH has been winning some big projects, even from those data center giants like Microsoft and Google.
That's a great point. But there is some potentially concerning news for the data center sector. U.S. restrictions on exports of those advanced AI chips are having a ripple effect even here in Malaysia.
Yeah, we're seeing share prices of Malaysian companies involved in data center construction and property taking a bit of a hit.
Analysts are urging investors to exercise caution before diving into that sector. It's a reminder that global events, even political decisions made thousands of miles away, can impact Malaysian markets.
Absolutely. It really highlights that interconnectedness of the global economy. Now, switching gears to a completely different industry, let's talk about the impact of the recent Gaza ceasefire.
Right. This has implications for companies like Nestle and Berjaya Food, which owns Starbucks in Malaysia. They've been facing boycott pressure due to the conflict.
So the ceasefire is good news for them, right?
It certainly eases some of the pressure, but they still face intense competition from local brands, not to mention rising costs across the board, so it's not going to be an easy road to recovery.
It's a reminder that business is rarely a simple equation. There are so many factors at play, from geopolitics to consumer sentiment to local competition. Now here's a story that illustrates the challenges of the airline industry. SKS Airways, which recently rebranded as True Air, is shutting down operations.
This is actually the second Malaysian airline to fold post-pandemic. They're citing regulatory hurdles and the difficulties of maintaining their island-hopping business model as the main reasons.
They had plans to expand using those Embraer jets, but they hit a snag when they couldn't secure enough landing slots at Subang Airport. It seems even the best-laid plans can be derailed by logistics.
It's a tough business, that's for sure. Now, on a completely different note, let's talk about a company that's riding high, Tanco Holdings. This property developer is rewarding its shareholders with a massive bonus issue.
We're talking 7 bonus shares for every 5 held. That's incredibly generous.
And it comes on the heels of their stock price hitting a 27-year peak. It has more than tripled in value in the past year. Talk about a success story.
It certainly makes you wonder what they're doing right. Maybe they've got some insider knowledge about the property market that we don't. Either way, it's a company to watch.
Finally, for Malaysian company news, we've got a cross-border acquisition to discuss. Singapore's Green Esteel has taken a controlling stake in Southern Steel.
This move further solidifies Green Esteel's presence in the Malaysian steel industry. It's a clear sign of the growing integration of Southeast Asian economies. And speaking of integration, it's worth noting that Green Esteel also has a major stake in BRC Asia, a Singapore-listed construction materials company. They're building quite the portfolio.
They're definitely a company with regional ambitions. So we covered a lot of ground there in Malaysian company news. Anything in particular that stood out to you?
You know, I have to say, that potential DBS takeover of Alliance Bank is really making me think. Imagine the changes that could come to Malaysian banking if that goes through.
Yeah, it's a big what if for sure, but the possibility is definitely intriguing. What about you? Anything catch your eye?
I'm honestly a little surprised by Ancom Nilex's profit dip. I thought they were doing better than that. But I guess with all the global economic uncertainty, it's not too shocking.
Yeah, it does highlight how those external factors can really throw a wrench in even the best laid plans. But I'm curious to see how their potential mergers and acquisitions play out. Maybe that's their strategy for navigating these uncertain waters.
Maybe so. Now, on a brighter note, I'm pretty excited about CBH Engineering's IPO success. It's not every day you see a debut that strong.
It really does point to the potential of Malaysia's tech sector. But I can't help but think about those U.S. restrictions on AI chip exports. How do you think that will impact companies like CBH in the long run?
That's a great question. I mean, they're winning contracts from the likes of Microsoft and Google now. But what happens if those projects are scaled back or put on hold because of chip shortages? It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even when things seem to be booming, there are always challenges lurking around the corner.
Speaking of challenges, that SKS Airways shutdown is a tough one. It's sad to see another airline struggling in this post-pandemic world.
Makes you wonder, is the island hopping model just not viable anymore? Or is it a matter of adapting to the new realities of the industry?
Perhaps it's a bit of both, but I think it's a good lesson for any business, really. The need to be adaptable and willing to pivot when circumstances change.
Couldn't agree more. Now, on a completely different note, let's talk about that Tanco Holdings bonus issue. 7 bonus shares for every 5 held. Someone's feeling generous.
I know, right? I mean, their stock price has been on a tear lately, but this seems almost excessive. Makes you wonder what they've got up their sleeve.
It certainly makes me want to take a closer look at their financials and see what's driving this confidence. Maybe there's something we're missing.
Maybe so. It's always good to be reminded that there are still opportunities out there for savvy investors. Now let's shift our focus to the international scene. First up, we've got this potential Chinese interest in those Volkswagen factories in Germany.
I find this story fascinating on so many levels. I mean, imagine the implications if Chinese companies start gaining a foothold in the heart of the German auto industry.
Talk about shaking things up. I can't imagine the German unions would be too thrilled about that prospect. And what about the European car makers? They're already facing intense competition from Tesla and other EV manufacturers.
It could be a game changer. And it speaks to China's growing global ambitions. They're not just content with being a manufacturing powerhouse anymore. They want to be leaders in innovation and technology.
It's a bold move.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, from potential economic shakeups to political drama, the situation in South Korea is getting more intense by the day.
The arrested president is digging in his heels, refusing to cooperate with the investigation into his attempt to impose martial law. His lawyers are now challenging the legality of his arrest. It's a real power struggle.
And it has the potential to destabilize the entire region, both politically and economically.
Absolutely. South Korea is a key player in the global economy. Any instability there could have ripple effects far and wide.
Speaking of ripple effects, European automakers are facing a different kind of pressure. They're lobbying hard to get the EU to scrap those potential fines for not meeting their CO2 emission targets.
It seems they're arguing that the issue isn't a lack of supply of electric vehicles, but rather a lack of demand. Consumers just aren't buying EVs at the rate needed to meet those targets.
But isn't that their problem, not the EU's?
Well, that's the debate. They're saying the targets were unrealistic to begin with, and that the fines will cripple the industry. It'll be interesting to see how the EU responds.
And across the Atlantic, the U.S. economy is sending mixed signals. Retail sales are up, which is good news. But jobless claims have also ticked up unexpectedly.
The U.S. Federal Reserve is in a tough spot. They're trying to balance these conflicting indicators while also navigating the uncertainties of the new Trump administration.
Trump has always been a bit of a wild card when it comes to economic policy. I imagine that's making things even more difficult for the Fed.
Absolutely. Predictability is essential for economic stability, and Trump has never been known for being predictable. Now let's circle back to our region. It seems Thailand is looking to Malaysia for inspiration in the realm of digital governance.
I always love to see regional cooperation and knowledge sharing. It's great that Thailand recognizes Malaysia's achievements in this area.
Their deputy prime minister specifically praised Malaysia's smart city projects and cybersecurity efforts.
Hopefully this will lead to more collaborative efforts in the future. A rising tide lifts all boats, as they say.
Exactly. But while Malaysia is being lauded for its digital advancements, TikTok is facing some serious scrutiny in the EU.
It seems the complaints are centered around their data privacy practices. There are allegations that they're illegally sending EU user data to China.
This is a big deal because it highlights the growing concerns about data security and the power of these tech giants.
Consumers are becoming more aware of how their data is being used, and regulators are starting to take notice.
It'll be interesting to see how TikTok responds to these allegations and whether this leads to stricter regulations on data collection and sharing. Now for our final story today. Let's talk about a social media platform that's exploding in popularity, Xiaohongshu.
It's often described as China's answer to Instagram, and it's seeing a surge in interest, even from users outside of China.
Their valuation is estimated to be around US $20 billion, which is staggering. And here's an interesting tidbit. It's been the most downloaded free app on iOS this week, partly fueled by US users who are concerned about the potential TikTok ban.
So one platform's potential downfall could be another's gain. It's a fascinating example of how quickly things can change in the digital world. We've covered a lot of ground today, from potential banking mergers to political intrigue, from airline struggles to social media shakeups. It's been a whirlwind.
It certainly has. And it's a reminder that the world of finance and geopolitics is constantly in flux. There's always something new happening, some fresh development that could impact our lives.
Which brings us to our final takeaway for today. Out of all this news, what's the one thing you think our listeners should really focus on? It's a tough one. There's so much happening, it's hard to choose just one. But if I had to pick, I'd say it's the theme of global interconnectedness.
Yeah, I like that. We saw it with the potential DBS takeover of Alliance Bank, those U.S. chip restrictions impacting Malaysian data centers, and even Chinese companies eyeing those Volkswagen factories in Germany.
Exactly. It's a reminder that what happens on the other side of the world can have a very real impact on us here in Malaysia, whether it's political decisions, economic trends, or technological advancements. We're all part of a global ecosystem.
And that means we can't afford to be insular in our thinking. We need to be aware of what's happening globally and how it might affect our investments, our businesses, and even our daily lives.
So what can our listeners do to stay ahead of the curve in this interconnected world?
Well, I'd say the key is to stay informed. Be curious. And don't be afraid to ask questions. There are so many resources available these days, from podcasts like ours to financial news websites to expert analysis.
And don't forget the power of conversation. Talking to friends, colleagues, or even family members about these issues can help you gain different perspectives and insights.
Absolutely. Sometimes the best insights come from unexpected places.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of finance and geopolitics, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We've talked a lot about external forces shaping Malaysia's economic landscape, but what about internal innovation?
That's a great point. We've seen how Malaysia is attracting interest from international players, but what if we saw more Malaysian companies making bold moves on the global stage?
We have some homegrown success stories like AirAsia and Top Glove, companies that started here and became international powerhouses. What will it take for the next generation of Malaysian companies to follow in their footsteps?
That's the question we need to be asking ourselves. What kind of ecosystem do we need to create to foster innovation, encourage entrepreneurship, and support Malaysian businesses as they venture out into the world?
It's a challenge, but it's also an exciting opportunity, and it's a conversation we need to be having as a nation.
So to our listeners, we challenge you to think about this. What role can you play in supporting Malaysian innovation and helping our businesses thrive in the global marketplace?
We've given you a lot to think about today, and we hope it sparks some insightful conversations and perhaps even inspires some action. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the latest financial and geopolitical news.
We'll be back next week with more in-depth analysis and thought-provoking discussions.
Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay ahead of the curve. And don't forget to subscribe to the Malaysia Money Matters podcast for more insightful analysis delivered straight to your ears. Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you would like a deeper dive into all the investment opportunities from today's news, subscribe to my newsletter at moneymatters.substack.com. I will be sharing a deeper analysis of the key investment opportunities from today's news, including what makes these opportunities stand out and how they fit into the broader market trends. By subscribing to the Malaysia Money Matters newsletter, you will also get exclusive insights on my watch list and portfolio and fundamental reports on Malaysian listed companies.